Hey guys, it's Miss Johnson and I'm here to bring you our notes for Unit 1, Notes 3. Today we are finding the mean from a frequency table. So we are going to take a look at a frequency table and we are going to talk about how we find the mean from this table. But first let's just talk about what a frequency table actually is. So our frequency table that we have here shows the depiction of it seems like a class. The data that we're looking at is number of tardies. And then we mark the frequency for each number of tardies that exists. So there were 5 people who had 0 tardies in whatever they're looking at. Maybe it's a trimester, maybe it's a month, maybe it's a whole semester, who knows? There were 6 people that had 1 tardy, there were 10 people that had 2 tardies, 7 people that had 3, 5 people who had 4 tardies, and 1 person had 5 tardies. So the frequency is marking the number of people who fit into that category, okay? So to find the mean from this frequency table, our process is pretty simple here. The first thing that we're going to do is we are going to multiply the number of tardies by its frequency all the way across, and then take that and do that all the way down as well. So 0 times 5 gives me 0. 1 times 6 gives me 6. 2 times 10 gives me 20. 3 times 7 gives me 21. And 4 times 5 gives me 20. 5 times 1 gives me 5. Okay, so that's the total number of tardies for each row. Now I need to add up that column to get the total number of tardies for the whole class. So I have 0 plus 6 plus 20 plus 21 plus 20 again plus 5, and I get 72 for a sum there. So here's my sum of the data, okay? That gives me the sum for the whole table. I also need to know that n. Remember that n that we talk about every day? We know that we need n for pretty much everything that we do in statistics. My n in a frequency table comes from the frequency. This is the number of people that fit into each category. So if I add up my frequency, I get my n. So 5 plus 6 plus 10 plus 7 plus 5 plus 1. And I end up with a total of 34 people. So there were 34 people in that class, and those 34 people earned a total of 72 tardies. Once you get the sum of the data and the n, the mean is super easy. The mean comes from 72 divided by 34. 72 divided by 34 gives me 2.117. 2.117, and my data goes on. Remember that round off rule that we've talked about before. We want to round 1 decimal place beyond our data. Our data is all whole numbers here. You can't really have a partial number of tardies. So our data is all whole numbers. So that means I'm going to round to the 10th place. So this 1 tells that 1 to stay down. So my mean here, I'll go back to blue. Green is kind of hard to see. So my mean here is 2.1 tardies. Okay, so that's how we find the mean from our frequency table here. Now, this frequency table is kind of unique and well, not unique, but this frequency table is kind of simple under the fact that each category was only one value. So all of the categories that we had here, there was only one value in each of these. That's not the case of tardies. You know, our mean was 2.1, which was somewhere right kind of in the middle here. And that 10 is what drew our mean closer to the 2, okay? Those frequency tables. So we're going to talk about what we do when we have a frequency table that has categories that are intervals. So a frequency table is a list of classes or intervals, there's that word, of values and their corresponding frequencies to from a given data set. So the frequency comes from the number of people or the number of times that occurs. Okay, so then from the frequency table at the number, think low, we get what's called the class marks. And this is what happens when we have an interval that we're working with. So the class marks come from the midpoints of the classes. So each interval, we need to find the midpoints of those. The way we do that, it's the same as finding the mid-range. low value plus high value, and then divide by 2. So it's finding the mid-range of each interval. Mid-range was one of those measures of central tendency that we when we looked particularly about the answer out. So this is kind of your step-by-step process. If you're a person who likes to follow steps, here you go. You've got, your first step is that you need to find the n. Check, we know how to do that. Find all the class marks. That's that, the mid-range of the classes. That's what that is. Multiply the class marks by the corresponding frequency. Then you find the sum and divide it by the n. And remember that that just comes from the fact that our mean is equal to the sum divided by the sum of the data divided by the number. If you look back at those steps, we're going to find the n in our first example that you get when you do the points. So let's try this a couple of times. Here's our frequency table. We have time here. Our time goes from 1 to 10 seconds, 11 to 20 seconds, 21 to 30, 31 to 40, 41 to 50. Okay, great. So the first thing that I'm going to do, so the n comes from the frequency. So I need to add up all of my data points here. I have 10, 8 and 2 makes a 10, 6 and 4 makes a 10, that's 10, 20, 30. So you can use your calculator there. I just did it quick in my head. My n is equal to 30 here. Then the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to find the class marks. And remember, class marks is like the mid-range of the interval. So if I'm going to find the class mark of this, okay, I need to take the 1 second plus the 10 seconds. Sorry, that 10 was kind of ugly. Let me fix that. 1 second plus 10 seconds and divide it by 2. So that's 11 over 2, which is 5.5. Down here, I have 11 plus 20 divided by 2. That's 31 over 2, which is 15.5. Once you usually do a few of them, you can kind of start to recognize the pattern here. 21 plus 30 over 2, that's 51 over 2. That's 25.5, and you can see I'm going up by 10. I started at 5.5 and I'm increasing by 10 each time, which makes sense because my intervals go up by 10, so then my mid-range is going to go up by 10 as well. So if I keep going here, I've got 31 plus 40 over 2, that's 71 over 2, which is 35.5, and the last one, 41 plus 50 over 2, is 91 over 2 and 45.5. Oops, 45.5. There's my undo. I was like, there's got to be an undo somewhere. There it is. Keep going. 45.5. Okay, so here's my class marks. My class marks are listed right here. With those class marks, I need to take the frequency and multiply by the class marks, because there were 4 people that fell in this interval. And the problem with that is we don't know where those 4 people fell. Those 4 people could have been all at 1 second. Those 4 people could have all fallen at 10 seconds. We don't know where they are. So because we don't know where they fall within the interval, we just use the average. We use the class mark to calculate our mean here, okay? So I'm going to take that 4, I'm going to multiply it by 5.5, and when I do that, I get 22. So 4 times 5.5 gives me 22. Hopefully you can see that green okay. The next one, 6 people scored in this interval, so we're going to use the average, because again, you don't know where they scored within that interval, so we just have to kind of guess, and by guessing we use the average. So 6 times 15.5. If you didn't have your calculator out before, you're going to want it today, definitely. So 6 times 15.5 gives me 93. And then the 8 times the 25.5, which is 204. And then 10 times 35.5, which is going to be 355. Don't even need to type that one in. And then 2 times 45.5, which is funny because that's what we divided by, so I'm back at 91. All right, so there's the products of my frequency times my class marks. Frequency times class marks gave me those products in green. I'm going to go ahead and add those up. When I add up the total of those, 22 plus 93 plus 204 plus 355 plus 91, I end up with 765. Okay, so now let's go ahead and do our mean. So I've got my sum, I've got my n, and I can find my mean from there. 765 divided by 30. 765 divided by 30 gives me 25 and a half. And I'm looking at seconds here. So 25 and a half seconds is my mean based on this frequency table. Now, one thing to kind of spot check, this 25 and a half should fall somewhere kind of in the middle of your table, especially depending on your frequency. You know, we have more people in this 31 to 40, so that's going to bring the mean closer, or I guess I should say up higher in the larger number of seconds than we do down here in the lower number of seconds, but we should be somewhere in the middle, just like back of a frequency table. A lot of times I see people get the mean of a frequency table that isn't even in the intervals. And it's like, ooh, something was a mess here. You're still looking at a measure of central tendency, which means you still need to be somewhere inside your data. All right, let's do this one more time together. We're going to look at a bunch of heights now. I've got heights in inches from 48 inches all the way up to 71 inches, and they're grouped by 48, 9, 50, 51, 4, intervals of 4, okay? So the first thing that I have to do is find the class marks. Actually, let's do the n. We'll find the n first. N is pretty easy to find, so it's a good thing to tackle. So if I find my n here, I'm going to add up my frequency. 2 plus 12 plus 10 plus 9 plus 7 plus 3. I'm looking at 43 things. We can assume people, but we don't know. But 43 items, 43 pieces of data in our data set. All right, so now let's do class marks. So remember, those class marks come from the intervals, and we want the mid-range of each interval. So my class marks look like 48 plus 51 divided by 2. So 48 plus 51 is 99, divided by 2 is 49 and a half. So the next one down, 52 plus 55 divided by 2. 52 plus 55 is a 107, divided by 2 is 53 and a half. And again, it's logical here. From 49 and a half to 53 and a half, I went up by 4. My intervals are all increasing by 4. So it makes sense that the class marks, the mid-range of them, would be 4 units apart. But we can just keep going here. 56 plus 59, 115 divided by 2, 57 and a half. And then 60 plus 63 is 123 divided by 2 is 61 and a half. 64 plus, 64, I can type that in right, plus 67 divided by 2 is 65 and a half. 68 plus 71 divided by 2 is 69 and a half. And those are all of my class marks. All right, so now I've got to do the multiplication. So I need the frequency of 2 times the class mark of 49 and a half. I divided by 2 to get there, so that 48 plus 51, I could just go back and look at, which was 99. I got a number of 99 there. I'm going to switch my green so it's a little bit easier to read for you. So next one down, I'm going to take 12 times 53 and a half, 12 times 53.5, and I end up with 642. That was an equal sign, sorry, got a little messy. 10 times 57 and a half is going to give me 575. The 9, so that was 10 times 57 and a half, 9 times 61 and a half. I get 553.5. The 7 times 65 and a half gives me 458.5. And then the 3 times 69 and a half gives me the 208.5. All right, so there's all of the products I get from multiplying the frequency times the class marks. And now I'm going to go through and add all those up, and that gives me my sum. So 99 plus 642 plus 575 plus 553.5 plus 458.5 and plus 208.5, I end up with 2,536.5. So now let's do our mean. So I'm going to have my mean of 2,536.5 and divided by 43. And I get 58.983, and it goes on. So that's approximately, if I'm using the round off rule, I'm going to round to the 9. This is kind of a funny one because the 8 tells the 9 to go up. So then I'm at 59.0 inches. Sorry, I was still on time there. Inches. So 59 inches is my mean there. And that makes sense when I kind of spot check it because it puts me right in about here. And the higher frequencies down at this lower end of the table are what pull me down towards the lower end instead of being up at the higher, but I'm still kind of right in that middle. And again, this is a measure of central tendency, so I should be somewhere in the middle of my intervals. So that's the end of our notes for today. Thanks for listening. Take care of your practice assignment and let me know if you have any questions. I hope you guys have a great day. I'll catch you next time.